Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Untitled Marvel Project. I'm your host, Tanner Dexter, joined as always by my two bug-brained compatriots, Tucker Hazel and Abram Buhner. I call them that out of love, and also because we are reviewing the 2015 Peyton Reed film, Ant-Man. But before we get into that, I want you to subscribe to Backlog Banter. I want you to like the video. I want you to drop your thoughts on Ant-Man in the comments or in the Discord channel. That link is in the description. There, you can talk about it. You can talk about Marvel movies. You can talk about the other kinds of movies that there are. There's not that many outside of Marvel movies.
Marvel movies and other movies. Those are the
Marvel
two...
movies, other.
Well, according to the Ad Astra director, there are only Marvel movies.
I saw that clip, but we're not going to get into it
James
today.
Gray.
Today we're going to be getting into Ant-Man. A film that, along with the rest of the MCU, I haven't seen since I rewatched the entire kit and caboodle 2 years ago. But how long has it been for you fellas since you've seen Ant-Man? And what are your thoughts on it?
So I saw Ant-Man one time prior to this, and it was at home. I didn't see this one in the theaters. It was during the arc of my Marvel life where I didn't really have friends that were watching things with me, and so I couldn't really be motivated to go to the
still
theater.
don't.
Yes.
I couldn't be bothered to go to the theater unless for the biggest ones. So I went for Ultron and for Civil War on either side of Ant-Man. And I think what was interesting to me about rewatching this movie is that scale in particular. The positioning of this movie, I think is quite interesting. Surrounded by two large, consequential, essentially event films.
Yeah.
And what I like about Ant-Man a lot is that it feels completely small, and it's not an ant joke. This is not a quantum joke. It's just a fact about the scale of the film. It references the events of Sokovia, and of course we fight Falcon. But for the most part, this is just about Paul Rudd going on a heist, and I find that to be quite compelling. Even if I think stylistically it ends up feeling like pretty clearly a director was supposed to make this movie, and then they said, hey, what if a different director made this movie? It is nonetheless, coming on the other side,
What if the Yes Man director made this movie?
I think it is a well-assembled and enjoyable small-scale MCU picture. So I have quite a lot of fun with Ant-Man, as I did then and still do now.
Nice.
Yeah, I gotta be honest, I don't remember the last time I saw Ant-Man or the first time I saw Ant-Man. I know for a fact I have seen this movie multiple times in my life before a couple days ago when we watched this. But this movie, to me, sticks out in basically no particular capacity. So I have no, strong core memories with it like I do a lot of, especially leading into Phase 3 and since. But, yeah, I agree with Abram, largely. The scale of this movie is, I think, its most interesting aspect and how it's positioned between those other two movies. But I also think that kind of shines a bit of the flaws on it because you can compare this to some of the other smaller scale solo movies, but I just don't really think it's as strong as them. Peyton Reed's style is non-existent, and frankly, I don't find the cast of characters here to be anything super compelling. I like Michael Douglas as an actor. I like Evangeline Lilly as a person. Just kidding.
I agree with her. I agree with all of her political takes.
I love Paul Rudd and everything he's in, but I don't know if the script or the stakes or the scenario here are compelling enough for me to just fall in love with what Peyton Reed has crafted here, with standing on the shoulders of Edgar Wright and kicking him into the ground. But I just feel like this is one of the worst offenders of flat Marvel style, and unfortunately also Marvel comedy, which doesn't really hit as well here as I think it does in some other Marvel properties. This is maybe I'm being a little more critical because we're watching these all back to back, and I'm trying to just really be analytical about what I love about MCU movies and which ones I don't. But this is not one I have any particular affinity for. I think it's a fine movie, but low tier MCU for me.
Sure, yeah. I mean, Tucker, you gave a little allegory there of Peyton Reed kicking Edgar Wright into the ground. I'm going to continue that because I think it's kind of a well-known thing that
Let's
Edgar
kick
Wright,
him too. Let's kick him while he's down.
Let's kick him while he's down. I say, no,
Fuck
no,
you, Edgar.
No, Tucker, no. It's sort of well known that Edgar Wright had an Ant-Man film in the works. That's what sort of preceded the MCU, and once things got rolling, he got it was maybe an avenue for him to get that film made. But the powers that be weren't crazy about the direction he was going to take with this Ant-Man film. So that Ant-Man movie was, put to rest, dead, buried 6 feet under the ground. But Peyton Reed comes along, and he takes out his shovel, and he digs up that grave, and he steals only the nicest and the prettiest bones of Edgar Wright's Ant-Man film, and he puts them together in his own Frankenstein monster of Ant-Man. I say that Ant-Man's not a Frankenstein monster of a film. It's just that the best parts are so clearly leftover pieces from Edgar Wright's film.
Yeah, sure.
And
all the cement holding it together is Peyton Reed styled cement.
Exactly.
Like,
yeah. Gray, little bumpy, little coarse cement holding these otherwise quite memorable things together.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it is just kind of the flatness of Ant-Man that turns me off a little bit, because as Tucker alluded to, like the script, for example, you have Paul Rudd, probably the most overtly comedy actor that we've gotten up until this point in the MCU.
Maybe Chris Pratt as well.
Yeah, I mean, but Chris Pratt was known for Parks and Rec, but Paul Rudd was in
Not a
comedy movies. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
I'm fucking with you. I'm fucking with you.
He was in comedy movies, multiple of them, I think. And what he's given to work with here, and what the ultimate end of his performance is, fine. Like, he cracks some jokes, but he doesn't get to be Paul Rudd in any sense of the word.
Yeah.
And
well,
then he's sensitive of his comedic stylings, I guess.
Sure.
And I think that's another sort of letdown for me. And like I said, I like the heist elements. I like the Thomas the Train bit and stuff like that. And there's little gags thrown in there about like there's the big epic grand scale of like the final battle or whatever. And then we cut out and it's just a suitcase tumbling through the sky or whatever. Those are all good bits, but the connective tissue, the character stuff, is just not really strong there.
Yeah,
I think so. I think this movie only feels patchwork together in terms of style. I think in terms of plot and character, it's about what I would have expected, frankly.
Sure.
If anything, it might suffer from the fact that who gives a turkey about Darren Cross, really? And
whoo, doggy.
and I have said, and just said last week, that ultimately I don't care necessarily if Ultron is weaker, because he's motivated by these characters who are established. And in the case of Ronan, Ronan is backgrounded in Guardians of the Galaxy. It's really about the team. But this movie really wants to be about Hank Pym and Darren Cross and about hope, right?
Yeah.
But I don't really care, and I don't think that's just a me issue. I think that we spend a disproportionate amount of screen time with them, but a lot of it sort of presupposes that we feel some sort of motivation to like care that Darren Cross was passed over. We don't even see it happen. It feels like we're not shown the requisite scenes to really care about this sort of trio at the core of the entire plot of the movie. I think Paul Rudd stuff with his friends and family is actually a lot more compelling,
much more,
but it's not as much of a focus as I'd want it to be.
Yeah. I talked to Tanner a little bit about this as we were wrapping up this movie, and we're both like, we watched Ant-Man again, like no particular strong feelings on it, but maybe a little bit of blasé attitude, because a lot of my approach to Marvel movies is kind of inverted of what you might expect. I come into these films for the characters and the situations they're put in and their personalities, and watching them grow and be put in these situations. But I don't love the character work here. I don't love their arcs or the dialogue or the plot that they're put into. And of course, I think a lot of that revolves around Darren Cross not being very interesting, and the sort of politics around Pym Industries, like being kind of fuzzy, but also not very interesting, like kind of cold and business-like. And because of that, this movie is almost exactly opposite of why I love Marvel movies. Is I come to this movie to watch the action sequences, the creativity of the visuals when Scott gets very small or has to do something heist. That's what this movie certainly excels at, and I think Tanner was right in that. That was the Edgar Wright stuff. It's more visually inspired. It's significantly more creative, but a lot of this movie's runtime is not that, and it is learning about Hank Pym, who has an interesting past, but not a very interesting present, and Scott Lang, who, as you said, is pretty backgrounded, and Hope Van Dyne, who's not the greatest character, not like I don't love anything really about her other than Evangeline Lilly's very attractive, and Darren Cross being honestly one of the weakest MCU villains, not in terms of motivation necessarily, but just he is a bald white guy who wants business things, and boy howdy is that not very interesting.
Let's talk a little bit about Hank Pym, I guess. Let's
Sure.
start out there, because the movie so clearly wants to be about him. I think Abram alluded to that, and it is largely concerned with the relationship between him and Hope, in that sort of background, and that sort of ropes in the corporate espionage sort of plot line that this film is about. And Tucker, you mentioned a little thing about his past is very interesting, and on that note, I'd like to say the de-aging in this movie very, very good. I mean, we're 7 years on, and we've seen awful versions in those 7 years, and we've seen the Marvel de-aging and subsequent other versions get better, and this still really holds up, which is quite impressive to me. I mean, you have Michael Douglas looking great, but even the smaller players like Haley Atwell looks great, de-aged, or
Nope.
I guess aged up.
Unde-aged.
Unde-aged in many ways. And not Clancy Brown also looks good, de-aged.
It's not Clancy Brown.
I know, I said that. I said not Clancy Brown.
I know, I just remembered during the movie, you were
Yes.
very adamant, like, man, Clancy
Like, oh,
Brown
it's
looks kind of
Clancy
weird.
Brown.
And I'm like, no,
Yeah.
wrong guy.
Well, no, I guess they get John Slattery back as Tony Stark, so no de-aging necessary there. But yeah, looks good. And but if we're to more closely analyze Michael Douglas and his performance and Hank Pym's character, Ant-Man, the film is really trying to be about, like, I think it really comes around at the end in what it's trying to say, is that
Sounds like you're trying to write a Canvas discussion board poster here right now, filling out with all these phrases.
All right. Let's just calm down here a second. It's about living up to expectations set for you, largely by your children or your daughter, and more specifically in this film.
Sure.
And living up to the standards that they set for you as a child. You know, this idealized version of their father as a superhero, and Hank Pym failed his daughter in that regard, but Scott Lang succeeds in that regard. But I think what's lacking here is that you never get a sense of Hank Pym as like a bad guy, really. Like, everyone says, like, oh, Hank Pym, he's just a grizzly, grumpy old man. But I don't think Michael Douglas gets enough chance to do stuff like that. Like, obviously, in the comics, this is sort of built upon this thing of Hank Pym building Ultron, and, you know, infamously having that incident. I think it was decades ago in the comics, but where he hit his wife, and that was like a big thing, and like sort of revamped and reimagined Hank Pym as a character, which is interesting. But it's just all that conflict and all of that, you know, sort of negative history is absent from this film, which just flattens out Hank Pym's character.
Tanner, I think you're right that that's the problem, but I think, in my opinion, you've diagnosed the wrong cause. Because here's what I feel is the real issue here. Mm-hmm. That's one of about 95 themes that this movie tries to communicate here.
All right.
Because the plot level movement of Ant-Man has a theme. And that is, you shouldn't try, like, war profiteering is bad, and you shouldn't try to stop conflict before it starts. Now, this is a plot line that we just talked about last week, and it's a plot line we talk about constantly. But that is basically what the Yellow Jacket suit is. And on the plot, the plot motivation of Hank Pym is, we can't let this fall into the wrong hands. Darren Cross is like, fuck it, I just want the money. Now, how many times have we seen this? About 9 billion. But that is one thematic angle the movie's trying to push. Then it's trying to push your angle, which I think is certainly part of the problem. But then the focus is being pulled away from that to the theme that I think is the most compelling, but certainly the least discussed, of like this criminal, like the recidivism of this guy who gets out of prison and can't find a job and turns back to crime, and the sort of rehabilitation and second chance of Scott Lang. And I think that is the most interesting material in the movie. And it like kind of tries to intersect with the whole like living up to your daughter's legacy thing, and it does at a certain point. But I feel like that might be where you can see how many cooks were in the kitchen here, because
Sure.
ultimately, like none of these, what I think are the three pillars of the film's theme, really have any opportunity to really be fleshed out. Because if you're telling a 2 hour superhero movie about a guy who can become as small as an ant, you really don't have time to go into all these avenues. And I think it's an issue of having both too much and too little going on with the messaging of the movie, I think.
And I think maybe that's the excuse me, the problem of
You're
all of this
excused.
is that thank you very much, is we don't have a clear focused character of this is who we're going to explore. This isn't Iron Man 3 in terms of a solo movie. This is like Guardians of the Galaxy if none of the Guardians were that interesting and there wasn't a clear creative
And somehow
vision.
there's less of them.
Yeah, exactly. Like the fact that we don't this isn't a Scott Lang movie. Like I always in my mind I see this as a Scott Lang movie. He is Ant-Man. The movie does hinge around him being a superhero, learning to be a superhero. It's his origin story. But the fact the screen time and it's just like the general plot division is between 3.5 characters, if you want to include Darren Cross in there, is
do.
where this becomes muddled. Like you're talking about the theme of Scott's criminality intersecting with his superhero life. That's the most interesting thing about Ant-Man, about Scott Lang, about the fact that his role as a father, but also as an ex-con, but a current con because he's sort of leaning back into that life because he can't get a job. Like these are interesting story points, but the fact is that can be easily wiped away by a techno genius old man who has a drinking suit, and there's like, well, we don't really need to think about that much. And I think that also is a little bit more explored in Ant-Man and the Wasp, which we'll get to eventually, because I think it does focus a lot more on Scott. But we this is an Ant-Man movie, but it's not as much about Ant-Man as you would want it to be, and that's what it's kind of confusing.
It's about an Ant-Man, just not the Ant-Man you want it to be about.
Yeah,
Because
he
they try
was
to do the
Ant-Man.
I mean, like
He's
they
not
try to do
really
the
Ant-Man.
they try to do the legacy thing, and we get like one scene of Hank Pym doing Ant-Man things as his wife goes subatomic, in what seems to be like a fairly avoidable issue, just like carrying those little discs and you can get out of the subatomic realm. Like maybe she wasn't carrying one, I guess. I don't know.
Were
Scott
those
was
invented back then?
Scott was the first one to try it. I assume is what that is, because he's like, fuck
Yeah.
it, might as well shove this thing in there.
Yeah, I suppose so.
Yeah. What I was gonna say, if we want to transition over to the titular Ant-Man, Scott Lang, Tuck, you brought up I guess you piggybacked off of Abrams' point, and that made me
Yeah.
think of something. Maybe
Thank you for the credit.
A little
Let's do a
tingle
little
in the
tower
back of the,
here.
Yeah,
I'll piggyback on him. You piggyback on me.
yeah, exactly. A little tingle in the back of the brain. A classic
You scratch
rewriting,
my back, I'll scratch yours.
a classic rewriting of the movie that we're reviewing here. And I think
Yes!
another
Great this.
issue is, I alluded to this with talking about Hank Pym, is that the darkness is missing with these men who have failed to live up or are failing to live up to the expectations of their children. So Scott Lang, it tries to push this theme of superhero dumb for conflicting with his past criminality and like him trying to get out of that and become a better man or whatever. But I would say, just personally, what we learn about his crimes is that he was basically Robin Hood. He Robin Hooded this company that he worked for, a company that was stealing money from its patrons, and then he redistributed that money back to the people who it was stolen from.
Yeah.
And like, sure, he goes to prison for that, but like morally, that was the correct thing to do. And it just doesn't strike me as thinking back on this now. I was like. And it wants us to say like, oh, Scott Lang, this like broken man, broken man who's has his dark criminal past. No, he like did the morally correct thing in that situation.
You
Yeah.
see, Tanner wanted to watch Scott Lang beat an elderly couple to death and then have to reconcile that for the next 2
I'm
hours
not
of
saying
film.
just make him like a regular burglar or a regular
Well-
bank robber or something.
See, Tanner, I actually, in a hypothetical version of the movie, I agree with you. In the practical version of the movie we have, I disagree because it goes back to what I think the central theme of the film is. It's sort of like the injustice of the criminal justice system.
Whoa.
To use,
Yeah, of course, the core thing that everyone talks about with Ant-Man.
Yeah, the criminal justice system.
Yeah, but ultimately, like that is that not what they're setting up? Like Scott Lang goes to prison for a morally correct crime, and
Yeah.
then nonetheless is unable to find any kind of position in society afterwards. Like,
Yeah.
that is clearly setting up the theme of
Yeah.
Scott Lang was fucked by the system, but then the movie decides to completely drop that.
That is my issue. Is that the inter-character conflict is that his ex-wife and his ex-wife's new boyfriend and
his wife's boyfriend.
His wife's boyfriend. They're all like, "Oh, Scott, I can't believe you're here. What a terrible person you are. Why don't you stay away from my daughter, you sicko criminal?" But like, that's not what the crime he committed is.
Yeah, I mean, the movie definitely tries to present him, and also with like getting fired from Baskin Robbins and all of that, having to recede back into crime, but he wasn't really a criminal before, so why does he have these?
A burglar.
Why does he have these?
Threat.
Why does he have these burglary skills with like cracking safes and stuff? Because his previous crime was kind of like white collar crime, there's a disconnect there to where the outcome of his character and what like the movie plays on doesn't match his like backstory.
Exactly.
And the way that they want you to feel like he is redeemable because the crime that he did was redeemable, but then they put him in a situation of where he's not redeemable, so he has to redeem himself. Like it's a muddy waters that like the more you peer into, you're like, I don't know if they thought about this that much.
Are we getting yelled at in the comments right now? Because is there a line that's like, and he went on to do other heists?
No, because he gets out of prison from that crime, and then immediately the movie unfolds. Now that doesn't mean that. Well, but here's the other thing. There is a line that says when he's at the dinner table when he wakes up in wakes up underneath Evangeline Lilly, when he comes down to.
That's where we all wish we could wake up.
To talk with Hank Pym, and Hank Pym says, "You broke into the thing, and the thing was supposed to be unbreakable, intuable."
Yeah,
and that implies that he has a certain set of skills that he probably developed prior. So I think you can write it off in part, but not in full, because again, it's like if you're playing baseball, and we love a good sports analogy here on the channel.
We love it.
It's like if you go up to swing the base, like you're gonna swing, and you're like, fuck it, and you drop the bat and walk away. You know, And you walk over to like the tennis court and you do something else.
Yeah, I see.
The last thing I want to say about this is like the reason I think this is so muddy is that it is talked about that the crime that he committed, Robin Hooding this money back to the people that they did wrong to, whatever fucking company,
insurance company, or
whatever the
fuck.
Sure.
Yeah,
he was
Goldman
an employee there.
Yeah,
he was an employee at this company.
Yeah.
So he had no reason to be a criminal before that because he had a steady, high-paying, white-collar job, and then he became a criminal because he was Robin Hood. So that is a justification, Abram. But then the movie cuts off its own intersection. Good Lord! But I think I do want to talk about something that this movie does do very well, which is how the movie opens and how I think the most interesting part of Hank Pym being a big player in this is talking about the history of S.H.I.E.L.D. and how... Okay, this is a minor point of this movie, but it's one of my favorite points of this movie.
Okay, all right.
Is the history of S.H.I.E.L.D. and the interplay between Pym and Howard Stark, and how Hank Pym still doesn't trust Tony Stark or the Avengers because they're still a part of that, and he was wronged by them. And I think all of that and the history of Ant-Man and the original Ant-Man and the Wasp is all a really cool backstory for the MCU that shows that, well, okay, superhero stuff, Captain America, okay, then in the 70s or 80s, you got Captain Marvel. There is some shenanigans going on back in the day, and I think that's really fun. It's just context that I find very interesting.
Yeah, I like that too. I also just like the general tensions. It's very throwaway, but I think it's nice world building of it nicely ends. Rewind. There's a scene where Scott Lang says, well, we should go call the Avengers.
Yeah.
And then we get what is transparently a way to not involve the Avengers, but on like a lore level, a cool explanation of, hey, I've been trying to keep this shit away from the Starks and
Yeah.
Shield and all the different players in the field. I'm not going to
Mhm.
involve them now when there's like a perfectly weaponizable version of the tech that we can
Yeah.
need to go pick up from the Super Bowl level CGI room that we encounter in the third act of the
Mhm.
film. So I like that. I do think that there are fun little nods there. I think it
Yeah.
connects into this larger lore very well. And I do like the Falcon fight.
Yeah.
It's is it silly? Sure, but I think that what we're missing when we get into the nuance of this film is that it's fun to watch Ant-Man pop out of the ground like a fucking gopher and
Yeah.
fight Falcon and hang out with Thomas the Train and
Yep.
have Michael Pena's dialogue like
Yes.
lip sync by the people in the various montage sequences. Like this is a very fun movie. A lot of my issues with Ant-Man, as we're discussing, are issues of hindsight.
Yeah.
When I'm watching the movie at 6 in the morning and I'm sitting here and I'm like, shoot, this is a fun film, and I think it is. I
Mhm.
think it is. I think it ties nicely into the MCU without being over encumbered by it, and it gives you
Yeah.
a lot of cool moments.
Yeah, I
Mhm.
agree. Let's talk about those cool moments. Let's talk about the heistiness. Let's talk about the montages. Let's have a little fun here for a second, shall we? Um, I love all the montages in this. Whether it's the Luis like over explaining things, a rambler after my own heart, of course, or whether it's like him training as Ant-Man or something like that. It's all fun stuff and it's well edited. It's got those the I don't know what it's called, but like the wipe transitions, which are cool. I like those. But yeah, as we talked about, it's probably likely left over from an Edgar Wright cut of this film or an Edgar Wright version of this film.
It's still on
Mhm.
screen though.
Yeah, still on screen and it's still good, which I really enjoy. But
A
yeah,
lot like the original Justice League in this
yeah,
way.
yeah. Wait, no, 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 no. But what do you guys think?
Yeah, those are absolutely the strongest parts of the film, and this is kind of what I was talking about earlier. The action sequences and the creativity of them, as I certainly want to get into, is where this movie does its most creative, in like unique and engaging stuff. But it also plays out in those edited montage sequences where those are the times I feel like the movie has its most personality with its characters,
Mm-hmm.
and that almost all comes from the side characters of Luis and his couple buddies, including David Desmalchian doing a really crazy Russian accent. But the fact that they have a fun camaraderie and bond and they glom on to Scott Lang, that's where the personality of the movie absolutely comes from.
I'm slowly collecting like a men's street hockey team worth of weird David Desmalchian like side roles in superhero
Exactly.
movies.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that. And I do like the side characters. I think that the movie does have a good charm to it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you say that even we Paul Rudd doesn't have a ton of room to maneuver here on like a comedic level. I still like his little winks to Cassie and fucking hitting the
Yeah.
horn, doing the ooh face and all of that. Like the movie does have a nice spirit about it. Is
Mhm.
that spirit papered over a script of uneven quality? Sure, but I agree with you. I like when Luis is fucking making waffles, or we're just hanging out
Mhm.
in the apartment,
Makes a lot of waffles.
or
Yes.
we're popping out of the ground because the ants are surprising Scott, or
Mhm.
he's trying to figure out how to time his size shifts and he
Yeah.
slams into the door. Like
Yeah.
these are good moments, and I love a good heist movie. I'm a big fan of heists,
Of course.
and this one is a lot of fun. I like all the moving pieces. It's a great sense of like one domino falls and we're trying to race the stack as it's all tipping over. As
Mm.
you know, we the cops are here, and then we're going to joyride in the police car. Then we accidentally
Mhm.
hit the horn, and the laser grid's not quite right, and the fucking ants are making rafts and rope swings out of themselves. Like this is all really inventive stuff, and I
Yeah.
just have a ton of fun watching it.
Yeah.
And
I
of
also-
course, Scott is able to use his ants basically identically to Pikmin. And I think that's really fun. I mean, they conduct electricity, he's building bridges with them. It's fucking great.
Oh my god. I also like that in those sequences, which are entirely CGI, they bring out the color in those sequences as well. I mean, my mind goes back to the escape sequence when he's escaping from jail for the first time, and he's riding Anthony through the streets, and there's taillights and headlights and neon signs and stuff like that lighting up everything. I'm pretty sure it's raining also, so that's sort of like conducting color. And there's a really cool mirror shot. Like those are where this film gets inventive and absolutely very, very fun. And Abram, all your points about the heist sequence is great. This is a good heist film on its own as well.
Mm-hmm.
You know, originally, before I rewatched it for this, I'm like, did people overemphasize like the heist movie element of Ant-Man? I don't think they do. I mean, there's you know, there's a smaller one to get it going, breaking into Hank Pym's house, which is just fun to see Scott Pym get to use his poorly Scott Lang get to use his poorly set up, but still cool to see in action heisting, breaking into houses skills. And then, of course, you know, you have the entire team working together, the Ant-Man team working together in that final thing, which is, I just like Michael Pena in this movie as well. Like he's knocking dudes out in one punch, and he's making little quips, and he's like he's getting real excited. And then Hope Van Dyne walks in, and he's like, "Oh, sorry, I'm very professional. Sorry, I don't mean to do that." But yeah, speaking of, do you guys have any other points on the heisty fun time elements of this?
Yes.
Tucker Hazel.
I think one of the reasons that the heist elements of this movie work so well for me, as I wouldn't call myself a big fan of heist movies when they're done well. I like them when they're not, which is
not being a bandwagoner.
Seems a little more likely than not for me. But is the score? I think that the Ant-Man theme is a perfect heist movie theme. But then when it gets really going, it feels like a superhero theme. So like they created a tone here in the score that absolutely matches it, but it matches the superhero shenanigans of the MCU, but gives it a heist spin. And I think it's one of the best MCU themes, and definitely one of the themes that's used the most frequently throughout this movie. You're always getting the buildup of the sort of like percussion bit at the beginning throughout the movie, and it always keeps it in your mind. And I'm just always humming along because I love that theme song. Because the MCU has great scores and great theme songs. Yes.
Yeah, some of them are good, and I remember them. Actually, they're probably all good. I'm not one to like I hate this film score. In fact, there's probably not one that I would act that way towards. But there is one more fun sequence of this that we've alluded to but haven't talked about in length, which is the scene that came out a total surprise for me, even though I knew it was in this movie, which is the Avengers compound scene. You know, how Ant-Man ties itself into the larger MCU and has a little cameo from Anthony Mackie as Falcon, which is fun. But when it happened, I'm like, oh yeah, this is in this movie. I completely forgot that. And it's fun. It's a lot of fun to see, you know, Anthony Mackie and Paul Rudd interacting, seeing these two characters interact for the first time, and that comes around in Civil War, which we'll get to next week. But yeah, it's a fun sequence to see, like, Falcon become completely mismatched with the guy that can shrink, and he's like trying to find him in the grass and stuff like that, and he's hopping in his backpack and he's pulling the wires out. It's fun. It's a good time.
I mean, the final fight's just so good too. It's
yeah.
Now I will say that I don't like the needle drop in the suitcase.
Oh, the cure needle drop.
Yeah, I think that's really poorly executed, but I think that's the only shoddy part of an otherwise really well executed fight scene. Right, because it does a nice job of, the movie has problems with its humor. I think maybe the most egregious one is when there's finally the emotional moment between Hank and Hope,
and they do. I was talking to Tucker about this.
It's almost satire.
I haven't found in rewatching these movies over the last couple months that it does the MCU thing of dramatic moment. Here's a joke to end it on. I haven't like felt that a lot, but this is very, very blatant in that, like, Scott Lang literally comes in, he's like, oh, did I ruin the moment? Or whatever.
But I do like, by contrast, the camera humor of, we're fighting on fucking Cassie's little train set, and then we fucking cut out, and it's little Thomas is flipping over there, but then Thomas gets turned into a huge rig. You know what I'm talking about? That's really clever stuff, and the hand-to-hand is good too, but there's just a great sense of dynamic scale to that final fight.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm operating on a bit of a compliment sandwich here, because I do want to end this by talking about, we've said his name a number of times, Darren Cross. Everyone knows him, everyone loves him, everyone remembers his name all the time.
Yep.
And I just want to talk about how he's maybe one of the worst villains in the MCU, especially one of the worst written ones, because they're very, very lazy with how they write this guy. Okay, so we know he's the protege of Hank Pym. He wanted to do some Ant-Man-y stuff, and he wanted to do some Ant-Man stuff, but Hank Pym's like, no, it's not. It's dangerous. Yada yada yada. Get out of here. But then we have to make him go crazy from particle madness.
Yeah, never explained. Is that actually true? Is he actually just an asshole? Like, why isn't why had why or no? I guess the particle madness is because he's been testing it, but he hasn't used this. He hasn't used the suit on himself.
He's just been
before
around
that.
it. Yeah.
He's been around this test. So, like, does that apply to all the scientists that
Just
have
say
also?
just say he's a megalomaniac egotist that's like a narcissist and completely sadistic or whatever.
Well,
You
I
don't
think
have to
that's
say
the
like
case.
I it is said on multiple occasions that he is going mad from being around these Pym particles essentially.
I mean, I guess that's true, but yeah,
It's just a useless part of the plot. Like we're
Yeah.
not saying it's like a huge thing. You
Mhm.
can watch the movie and forget about those sequences, as I have up until this point.
Mhm.
But it doesn't need to be in there.
Yeah. I also oh sorry, Abram, go ahead.
yeah. I mean, I just think the larger sin is trying to make us care about him. Again,
Yeah.
I don't need to care about the MCU villain of the month if it means that instead we're spending more time with the heroes. If it was just big, greedy, bad, capitalist, military industrial complex guys selling a fucking weapon,
Mhm.
fine.
Yeah.
But when he's got to be fucking bebopping and scatting around the Hank Pym manor, and he's got to
Yeah, well,
be
because they do
turning
this
lambs into fucking
goo.
vodka margarita marinara sauce. Like, there's
Yeah.
just I don't need this much of you, Darren.
Yeah, true. And I think they also try to like shoehorn this whole like Hope and Darren relationship in that she's like getting close to him to do this heisty espionage stuff, but that obviously doesn't come to fruition because the whole plan changes anyway because he ups security and stuff like that. I also we haven't talked about Hope a whole lot just because I don't think she has a whole lot to do in this movie because her role is largely negated by Scott's presence by nature of the plot and Hank not wanting her to get involved and get into the Ant-Man suit and stuff like that. But going back to Darren for a little bit, I also take issue with the fact that he just figures out the plan somehow.
He sees him on
Yeah.
the table.
Oh, he looks at a blueprint and he's like, I know exactly what's going on. Like that is maybe the rewatching all these films. We haven't gotten to all of them yet. I think that is maybe the most lazily written aspect of an MCU movie that I've come across is that we need conflict in the final thing. We need the villain to figure it out. Let's just say he figures it out somehow. People aren't going to catch it in the theater. But you know what? I caught it, Peyton Reed. I caught it in the theater, and I caught it on a rewatch 2 years ago, and I caught it now. And it sticks out to me more and more every single time. Yeah, it is a huge issue to me that there's no plot reason given other than maybe he sees a blueprint on the table, and he just knows because he traps Scott Lang in the thing. He's like, you've fallen right into my trap, you fools! Like, how did he know? It's never explained.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it doesn't bug me. You're right that it's bad. It's stupid. It's lazy. It doesn't bug me that much because I don't like. I'm just at this point of the movie. We're like 2/3 of the way through. The heist is about to happen. My brain is off.
Oh, sure, okay.
Right before the heist happens, and then I tune back in when shit starts going on. I'm like, yes, flashing colors. But like the fact that I, as someone who appreciates Marvel movies a lot for their characters, for the character writing, for the larger intricate story, the fact that this is one of the few Marvel movies where I turn my brain off, and that's how I end up getting more enjoyment out of it, is one of the great sins of why I put this movie lower in my MCU ranking. For sure.
Yeah, I mean, maybe this review has been overly negative, at least from my end of it. Because I still do like enjoy this movie, and I enjoy like the moments that like Paul Rudd is given and Michael Pena is given, and I think by and large, the theme about living up to the expectations set for you by your children is fine and is executed pretty well, all things considered. Like there's a few holes in it if you think about it for a while, but
The thing I would say
Um,
about that, and one of the reasons
yeah.
it does work to the degree that it does, is
Yep.
because I think the actress who plays Cassie Lang is
Oh,
fantastic.
she's great. She's fantastic.
She's also great in Ant-Man and the Wasp, and I can't wait to see her there when we get to that. But the fact that we have such a talented and charming daughter for him, like, she's a perfect comedic foil for
Yes,
Paul Rudd.
absolutely.
And their bond and all of her lines, absolutely fantastic. So, like, Abram talked about this earlier. That's one of the best themes of the movie. It's not played into, but whenever Cassie's on screen, and I like Bobby Cannavale a lot. I think Judy Greer also does a serviceable job. But that whole family dynamic, but especially the bond between Scott and Cassie, one of the highlights of this movie for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like I said, I like Ant-Man. I enjoyed it.
Like I said.
I had a lot of fun rewatching it. I think, again, there's a really fun heist movie papered over these thematic script level issues. And those they detract from the movie significantly in hindsight, but nonetheless, this is a really nice palate cleanser in amongst a lot of big movies. And I like the MCU exploring these smaller scales, and I'm quite glad that we were in an environment where this was a movie, not a Disney Plus show. Because I think it's paced pretty well. 2 hours, right on the money there. I found it to be very watchable. It flows to the really fun moments, as we're talking about, down to the character moments of an uneven quality and back and forth quite nicely. And then before you know it, boom, it's credits time. So it is fun. Is it as strong as the top tier MCU movies? No, but I do not put this in my bottom tier either.
No,
I think
it's mid tier. Yeah,
I think this is mid to high. It's the high end of the mid tier for me.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see your list once we
No, it
watch
won't be.
all of
So I'm not
them.
going to show you.
I'll figure it out.
Abram, we have all your log scores for the films. We can make a list with or without your oversight. We can do it.
And I got one more question for you before we score the movie.
What's that?
Do you think that if Edgar Wright directed this, Ant-Man's little wasp pal would have been named Casey Anthony?
I don't get it.
Abram, I have one last question for you before we score this film. And that is, Abram, did you watch the post-credit scenes for this film?
No, I didn't.
Okay,
I didn't.
Ding, 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 ding. We get to play everyone's favorite game. Does Abram remember the post-credit scene for a Marvel movie? There are two of them this time. I'll give them to you. What do you think the post-credit scenes for Ant-Man are?
I'm gonna imagine that one involves Sam.
Okay, you're on track so far.
He's probably having a conversation with Tony.
Whose team is he on in Civil? There you go.
Cap's team.
Yeah.
But I was just trying to, because they had the joke like, "Don't tell Tony what happened here." So he's chatting with Cap. That's gonna be one post-credit scene.
Yes.
The other post-credit scene is going to probably be about Spider-Man.
No.
Black
Panther. I don't think that deal was made at this point.
But
it definitely was. They were filming.
Because Civil War is about to come out.
Was
it about Black Panther?
Well, actually, from memory, I think that Spider-Man deal went public in like February of 2015.
This movie came out after February 2015.
It certainly did.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, so it's my
mistake. Is it
neither
Thanos?
of those. It's not Thanos.
Here's the thing.
Try a little closer to home, Abram.
Yeah, think of your Ant-Man characters. Think of a very obvious thing that needs to be set up for the future of the MCU.
Oh, Hank Pym is changing the bandage on his gunshot wound.
Yeah, there you nailed it.
Is he going into the quantum realm?
No.
Is he putting on the suit?
Is Hank Pym putting on the suit? Someone's getting a suit.
Is Grandma Pym coming out of the quantum realm?
You've gotten every member of the Pym family.
Is Evangeline Lilly getting the Yellow Jacket suit? Or the Wasp suit? I'm sorry.
She's getting a Wasp suit. And
that's a really obvious post-credit. It's like, we know that the Wasp is a character that appears, pretty soon after this. She needs a suit.
Does Charlize Theron cut a hole in New York City?
She cuts open a hole in the screen and she says, "Go see Mad Max Fury Road in theaters now."
Let's go score to Ant-Man.
Let's go Ant-Man.
Casey Anthony. That's all I have to contribute.
I don't get that joke.
It's a
Commenters explain that to Tucker.
Yeah, there you go. That's a
John
call to
Thorne?
action.
John Tor, if you're watching.
Yeah, that's our call to action for the comments. But I'm going to call you boys to action to enter your scores for Ant-Man. Is everyone ready?
Yeah.
3, 2, 1. Beep, 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 calculating. Oh, hey, look at this.
Oh, hey.
We're pretty close across the board here.
Within 1 point.
In descending order, Abram gave this a 6.8. I gave this film a 6.6, and Tucker gave it a 5.8. That'll average out for all of our math fans out there to a 6.4, placing this at place number 14, above the first Thor movie and below Spider-Man Far From Home.
Yeah.
This is better than Far From Home.
Not according to your... Not. Oh, it is. No, according
Yeah,
to your score,
I gave
definitely
Far
is.
From Home a
Holy shit.
4.8.
That's fucking wild.
Yeah. It is not that bad.
All right, what movie is the spin wheel going to give us this week?
Yeah, oh boy, gee, I want the spin wheel of watching these films in release order will give us Avengers 2.5. Captain America.
Don't be coy, Tanner.
Okay, alright. It's giving us Captain America, the Serpent Society, everyone. Are you excited? Oh, I can keep these bits rolling. No, we are, of course, watching...
You couldn't come up with another one.
No.
What is this, Captain America fucking 3?
Yes, it is Captain America: Civil War, one that I'm very excited to return to. I haven't. This is one of them I'm very curious to rewatch and hear everyone's thoughts on. It's got some sweet action scenes, a little Russo action in there. It'll be a good time, I believe.
The Russo brothers, esteemed creatives behind Cherry,
Of course,
or known more colloquially as Chirk.
Yes.
Sure.
And Yumi and Dupree, of course. All these classic films they've made outside of the MCU.
And Everything Everywhere All at Once, which apparently they're involved in somehow.
Yeah, they're producers or something on it, I think.
One of my favorite movies ever.
Very good. Very, very good, folks.
Yeah, it was,
Next week.
wasn't it?
Yeah. Next week, Captain America, Civil War. We'll see you then.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Untitled Marvel Project. I'm your host, Abram Buhner, joined as usual by
Oh, it's floating.
my co-hosts Tanner Dykstra and Tucker Hazel, and today we're here to talk about Ant-Man. But last week we talked about Avengers: Age of Ultron, and we ranked it and we put it in our spreadsheet. If you want to know what position it got, you can go watch the video last week, card in the corner. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell. Peyton Reed directed Ant-Man, and we got thoughts about it. Tucker, what do you think of Ant-Man?